Anybody, anywhere,
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen.
This pass caught by Paulsen, the tight end.
And from 106.7 The Fan, Grant Paulsen.
Welcome in to Take Command with Logan Paulsen, 10 years in the NFL. I'm Grant Paulsen. You can watch us on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980 YouTube channels. You can listen to this podcast wherever you get your audio. Please subscribe, rate, review, comment, all that stuff. And most importantly, let people know we're doing this. Spread the word. We want to grow this podcast, which is always easy to do during an 8-game losing streak. Logan, how are you?
I'm good. And just a reminder, we do really comprehensive draft stuff here too. So that's coming up down the pipe. Started doing a little bit of prep on that yesterday. So that's going to be a big part of our offseason plans for sure.
Dare I say, we're going to have the most comprehensive draft breakdowns of anybody in the market getting ready for the Commanders making either a really, really, really high pick in the top 5 or possibly, you're going to hear this from me 9 million times, so buckle up, trading down and accruing more draft picks because that is I'm trade down Paulsen. I don't know if you know that about me, just generally, but especially when you made the fewest picks last year and you've got the fewest top 4 round picks this year and you have as many holes as they do. The higher up the board you go, the better, because you can get more coming back. But trade down Paulsen might even move down 2 times before he makes a pick.
You know what's funny is the longer I've done the draft stuff, and this is more draft philosophy. So again, this is a little bit of a side, but when you look at the numbers, like the math in terms of draft hits and losses, the teams that pick the most have the best drafts. So it's not like rocket science how this thing works. Everyone kind of wants to overvalue their evaluation, trust this spot, do this thing, trade, like Atlanta's a great example, trading up, getting 2 edge rushers. Oh, we really believe in it. You're boned this year because you don't have a first round pick. So it's just, you want as much draft capital as you possibly can. It's a cheap, cost controlled asset that is a developmental piece of your organization, and you just want more bites at the apple. So I'm not quite that. My nickname's not Trade Down Paulsen, but I'm pretty close. You know what I mean? It's draft value Paulsen over here probably.
But what's amazing is your nickname could be Trade Down Paulsen because we have the same last name, even though we're not related.
Yeah, did I tell you when I go to the FedEx, more people call me Grant Paulsen than my actual first name? Did I tell you that? And which is a wacky bit to me because funny. They know me from the command center stuff. So it's like, right. Oh my gosh, I love your show, Grant. And you're like, nope, close, and I don't correct them. So everyone thinks my name's Grant. Right. But it's also funny because if on the screen we look like we're about the same size and we are kind of the same looking person.
Very similar, yeah.
And but in person, how tall are you, Grant? 5'6",
6'2", 6'3",
6'3", so yeah. And so we're
looking at 5'8", hefty 5'8", yeah.
So I'm 6'4", 6'5",
yeah.
A little different body comp, and people still get us confused, which is I always think is the funniest thing. So
yeah, there's definitely a twins, Danny DeVito, Arnold Schwarzenegger thing going on here. Well, my favorite ever was, this has been years ago now, but I swear I saved this highlight. I'm sure I've told you about it. You won't remember, but Larry Michael was still calling games. And so, and I might have even been on the beat at this point. I don't know, but I think Doc was doing sideline and you caught a pass or did something. And he's like, Grant Paulsen just got into the open field and Grant Paulsen made a man, ran over a man. And I was like, someone pull that audio for me right now. Because on air, it's just the most obvious Grant Paulsen ever. And it was just it was part of the highlight, and Larry did that, called a play one time. It was caught by Grant Paulsen at the 27. And I'm like, let's go.
Let's go.
So the more of those foibles for me, the better. I always got so sized.
No, it's a good deal. I'm glad we have this connection, man. It's been really
Indeed.
Good. So
yeah, I'll see you at the family reunion. And you spell it correctly, SEN, no less. Before we move on really quickly, I wanted to talk just about this matchup with the Giants as it pertains to the draft, because one of the storylines coming in is if you actually look at the draft order in the NFL right now, the Giants fairly shockingly have the number 1 pick.
Really?
They don't feel like the worst team in the NFL, but there are 3 teams that are 2-11. The Raiders, the Titans, the Giants. And it's done by strength of schedule. The Giants have actually played the easiest schedule, believe it or not, which is not how this was supposed to have been at the beginning of the year. And because of that, they have the tiebreaker. So right now they pick first. Washington would have the 6th pick in the draft. So picks 2 through 5 belong to the Raiders, the Titans, the Browns, and the Saints. They're all pretty heavy underdogs this week. Unless somebody pulls off an upset, though, this is a head-to-head matchup where if Washington were to lose, they would move up and leapfrog the Giants in the draft order. They'd have similar records. Washington actually has a softer strength of schedule. In fact, Washington's got the tiebreaker right now over a bunch of teams because they actually haven't played that hard of a schedule while also losing 8 in a row and having some of the issues they've had. But I say all this to say, what this leads to, Logan, is people saying, oh, well, if they lose, it's not the worst thing ever. And I wanted to just drill down on the difference between it not being bad after the fact when you lose because of the draft pick and what that means in the building. I think people struggle with this where they're like, oh, they should just lose the game. And it's like, well, even the Wizards who are actively tanking and trying to be awful, or some of these other teams that are if the Wizards win a number of games, get to a certain level, they lose a draft pick in the stupid NBA because it's not protected anymore. So they are literally making sure they don't do that as a front office, which you can do in some way. But that doesn't mean the coaches and the players on every possession of every game are not trying to win the game. I think people struggle with that a little bit, that idea of that it's not as bad if something happens versus they need to lose the game. And as if that means Dan Quinn should call the game in a certain way. Right. I've just always found it so funny the way it's talked about.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it happens in basketball. I'm sure it happens to a certain extent in baseball. My file on baseball is not very big. The
rules a little bit now to prohibit it as best they can, but it's certainly a thing. It's how you rebuild.
Yeah, and so with football though, I've been on some. I've talked about this before on the show. I've been on some really bad football teams, right? And I've never once ever felt from anybody in the football side, right? So non front office, so non GM, the tank, right? And so because the football, and I mentioned this I think on the last show. I am not trying to play necessarily let's say for the Redskins or the Commanders, right? I'm not trying to play for that team. I'm trying to make sure that I am still in the NFL. And the only way I can do that is if I play and have the best possible film I possibly have, right? Can possibly have, right? So you get all these guys who are playing really hard because they still want jobs. And I think that's the thing that people understand. And coaches too, right? Could you imagine if you were the coach and you went out and called a bad game? People, they don't care about the context necessarily. They're like, why did you call this? Why did you do this? Why did you play not hard if you're a player, right? And so I do think that's the difference in environment. Now, the only way I've seen an actual tank happen, I go back to Philly a couple years ago when we played the Commanders. Ron Rivera was here. They played Philly last game of the year, and Philly literally put all of their starters on IR. They were just everyone's on IR. We're elevating everyone from the practice squad. And again, those guys played really hard. They played as hard as they could. But those are that's how you would do it, is you would just say basically
So that's an important distinction. It's the front office has the ability because it also is multifaceted, by the way. It's not like they are doing that in a vacuum just so that the team loses. There's a prioritization of something else that is beneficial. So in other words, if Adam Peters wants to sit Dan Quinn down and say, all right, DQ, here's what we're doing now. Now, obviously, you had the Ertz injury, so this isn't as relevant. But as an example at that position, Zach Ertz is your best tight end. Zach Ertz isn't going to be here next year. So we're going to play Zach Ertz a little bit less, and we're going to play Ben Sinnott a little bit more. We're going to, actually, instead of Zach Ertz getting his requisite 7-8 targets, 4 or 5 catches, those are now going to Colson Yankoff and Ben Sinnott. If you wanted to do it that way, a real example with a healthy guy right now could be Bobby Wagner. If you know internally that you're probably not bringing Bobby Wagner back, and you're certainly not bringing Bobby Wagner back as your 100% of snaps all down green dot, then you could either Dan Quinn, sometimes the coaches, this is my point, the coaches don't see it this way. They're just trying to go out and win a football game. But Adam Peters and Lance Newmark can say, hey, man, listen, we need Jordan McGee to wear the green dot in week 16 or whatever, week 17. And I want him to get 45 snaps at Mike. And if Bobby plays something, that's cool. But this is now, we need 2 weeks to look at Jordan McGee. That's how you can do it in a way that works, in my opinion, from a front office standpoint. It also then theoretically lowers the ceiling of the team a little bit, right? You get worse because you're playing backups, young guys, whatever. Heck, the way this year is gone, who knows? Maybe you mess around and you don't get worse. But what I want to know is that's how it's done around the league, right? Front office level. As a player, what is the reaction to that kind of thing when you now can feel that, when you go, oh, okay, so I'm out here risking a career-ending injury and we're doing this bit for 3 weeks now, where we're just trying things out for next year. And does that matter if there's a little bit of animus? Does that matter if the players aren't that happy? Because the philosophy might be, well, this team's going to be different anyway. A lot of these guys are going to be gone. So it doesn't really matter if these guys are upset. Because I think about, like, long-winded here, one more point, but like, I remember when you were on this team actually, but when Shanahan played John Beck over Rex Grossman, okay? And like, they go to John Beck, and there was a couple games where he was like really, really bad. They get shut out against the Bills, and then the next week he set a record in catches with a running back and Roy Halou, checking it down 14 times. And I remember being told that week by one of the members of the offensive staff when they were going back to Grossman, he's like, dude, if we didn't, we would have had a revolt on our hands. He's like, I had more players come to my office to tell me, like, you have to do this about this than anything I've had since I got here, like in my career or whatever. And my point is, like, does that happen in these situations, and does it matter?
So obviously that was like middle of the year when they did that. If I remember correctly, it was like week 8, 9, 10, something like that. So kind of in the middle of the season, and guys were really juiced up about that. Like, I was a young player. I didn't really pick up on it the same way, but like some of the veteran receivers, I remember, I think it was like Jabbar Gaffney, Dante Stallworth, Santana Moss was here. Yeah, like they had a much better feel for what was going on in that game and in the quarterback room. And so obviously they went and voiced their opinion and made a lot of sense in hindsight. I think so. I've been a part of some teams that have been out of it, and my perspective on this is a little bit different because I am a fringe roster guy. So like when I start seeing these moves, like, oh, we're going to give Jordan McGee the green dot as an example, or we're going to put Laramie Tunsil on IR and we're going to see what the young offensive line has, whatever the situation is, right? I'm always like, shoot, I better double down here in terms of my preparation and work because they're making decisions about next year right now. And so like that, again, my perspective is different because like, I'm like, this is my opportunity to audition and I need to make sure that I'm putting my best foot forward because I want to make sure, again, like it comes back to like, I want to be employed. And so like, it's funny, like I do a lot of advising now for young guys coming out in the draft, and my agency has a lot of tight ends. And so like, they'll call me and we'll have conversations. And my one thing is like, once you're out of the league, it's really, really hard to get back in the league. Like once you're a practice squad guy, that's kind of how you're viewed. And once you're, a free agent on the street, week 16, like that's kind of how you're viewed. It's really hard to get back in. So my whole thing was just, can I stay relevant? And so in some ways, when these decisions started to happen, they started making these moves, like you can feel it, and it makes it really hard to lock in and focus because like there's all these distractions, but you had to, because I was like, man, these last 3 games have to be my best film I could possibly put out because I might get cut, but I want someone to look at it and be like, hey, that dude's playing his face off. Let's bring him in for this offseason for training camp, whatever it looks like. And so, yeah, and I'm sure older guys get frustrated with it. Like, just as an example, like Santana would never do this, but just as a name level of player, he might get frustrated because he's like, why am I playing? Why am I risking myself? Why am I risking my career? Why am I risking my money? But like for a lot of the guys on the roster, it's like, I got to make sure that I'm in the NFL in 2026.
Yeah, so that actually makes a good point. It depends on standing. What's your answer to, I guess, the people sitting at home going, well, it does, like, let's say there are players that are annoyed by that. It doesn't matter anymore because the team's going to be different next year.
It really doesn't matter. Like as much as you want to say that, like when people start doing that, when that GM decision comes down, like I talked to Tana about this yesterday, and Tana was like, I'd be mad, but like I'm still going to play my best football because I want to make sure that I have the opportunity and respect of the league to continue playing football. And I think the other thing too is like, this is maybe an underrated element, is you get some of the most competitive guys like in the world in the locker room, and you say like, go play football, like they're gonna pour it out. Like it's kind of like a racehorse analogy, right? Like my wife's into horses. Like the best racehorses love to run, right? The best football players love to compete. And if your roster's constructed the right way, those guys, even if they're upset, are gonna go out and play their best ball. So it again, like I don't think it creates the best environment, like it makes it difficult, but like that's the business side of it. That's the business side of this game, and it's the ugly side of it. But ultimately, like, people got to make the best decisions for their careers, GMs, coaches, players. And I think that's kind of what that does, those decisions. It starts making that process come to the forefront a little bit more quickly.
Is Sir Rayfield still racing these days?
Sir Rayford, yeah. He, no, not racing anymore. Just doing some hunter jumper stuff, very living his life.
Sir Rayford.
Yeah, Sir Rayford crushing it. So,
what a horse! What a beautiful horse, Sir Rayford.
What a beautiful animal.
Yeah, I got sized to meet Sir Rayford. My kids still talk about him.
Dude, come out anytime. We got another one. My mother-in-law just bought one named California. California Dream, I think, is his official racing name. That dude
is he a racehorse?
Yeah, he's a beast, dog. He's a beast. He's like
what color?
He's like black, and he's 17 hands. He's a huge horse.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
How big is Sir Rayford?
He's 16'3", so a little bit smaller.
Okay. Wow.
But
that's a big horse too.
Yeah, they're both big horses. But yes, Callie is a stud, man. So
all right, maybe the kids will have to get out there. Check out Callie. All right, speaking of diving deep, I want to get next into the matchup with the Giants. First, we'll go Washington's offense against their defense. Should actually be a nice matchup for whoever's at quarterback for the Commanders in this game. Just fired a defensive coordinator. They can't get stops. Then on the other side of the ball, the Washington defense dealing with Jackson Dart and the Giants offense. We'll get into that next on Take Command. Welcome back to Take Command. Logan Paulsen and Grant Paulsen getting ready for NFC East football. So a divisional gauntlet gets started here. Final 4 games, all within the East, 2 against Philly, and then games against the Giants and the Cowboys. Here's the good news for this matchup with 2-11 New York, 3-10 Washington. I know the Giants, despite being 2-11, are favorites, which is pretty telling. This defense especially, I think, can be had. If you look at where they rank statistically this year, the Giants are 29th yards per play on defense and 31st in yards per game. They are dead last against the run, 5.878 per attempt. They're 19th against the pass. Only one team picks off fewer passes. They're bottom 8 at sacks per pass attempt, which is crazy with their talent. They're second to last in first downs per game, so you can move the ball. They're 29th in the red zone. They're 29th on fourth down and 22nd on third down. They really don't do a whole lot well despite decent personnel, Logan.
Yeah, I think that's been the biggest surprise to me is like when you look at the roster, when you look at guys' individual play, like I started this off like my research in terms of like watching cut-ups. I'm like, that's a pretty good play by this guy. That's a good job. Like, Cordell Flott's doing a great job for them in terms of playing corner. And then, Paulsen Debo's doing a good job, but there's games where they get absolutely torched and lit on fire, right? You look at the pass rush individually, like Abdul Carter, man, like he's got a crazy high pressure rate, 12.8, almost 13% pressure rate. That's higher than Brian Burns, just to give you a point of comparison. Like Brian Burns is at 12.1. So like the pressure rate for both those guys is very good. Dexter Lawrence is playing good football for the most part. And it just seems like they can't do it all together, right? And I kind of was like, well, why? Why are they having this issue? Because I don't think it doesn't feel like a personnel issue to me. And so I kind of went back and I watched, and I basically came to the conclusion that one of the things that they do, which a lot of teams don't do anymore, is they kind of say, we are going to play our base coverage. So like, for example, if you get into 12 personnel, 13 personnel, a heavier personnel grouping, they're going to play single high. If you get into some type of spread with 11, they're going to play quarters. And if you have that kind of tell, and obviously there's a little bit of change up, but I'd say on the whole, those percentages would line up, right? If you're going to do that and not kind of bring a ton of pressure, not be able to generate a ton of pressure, especially bringing 4, and again, they can generate pressure with 4. It's just the coverage can't hold up because you can see teams, I was specifically watching that New England game where it's like they knew. It's like, oh, when we're in heavy 12 personnel with an extra offensive lineman, they're going to be in cover 3. Let's run a cover 3 beater. Oh, when we get an empty, they're going to get in quarters. Let's run a quarters beater. And they would just dice them up. And again, Drake May did a great job getting the ball out and kind of managing some of the pressure. Their left tackle in New England as a backup because Will Campbell's obviously out, and Abdul Carter absolutely lit that kid on fire. But Drake May did a great job kind of standing in the pocket, seeing the throw, getting the ball out. And a lot of it was because the coverage, like, what it is. So like comparing this to Minnesota, just as an example, like with Minnesota, you very rarely know the exact coverage that they're in. You're like, I think this is 0, but it actually is cover 2. I think this is cover 2 maybe, but it's actually in a 0 all-out pressure. And this is not that. This is a little bit more straightforward. It's a little bit more obvious. And I think that's one of the reasons, specifically in the back end, why you don't feel the rush, right? Because like if I know that it's quarters and I have a quarters beater on, ball's out. So I don't care if you win the rush in the front, like the ball's out, who cares? And so I think you're feeling a little bit of that when you watch this Giants defense.
So just talking defensive X's and O's for a second broadly, it would feel to me like your ceiling is much lower this way. Like just some of the adjectives you're using, right? Like simple or whatever. The Vikings do it in a way where there's a lot of questions. You don't know where it's coming from. If you kind of have the answers to the test, what is the philosophy then? Is it just my defensive front so good, you're not going to have the time anyway because they're going to win? Like, how is this a good plan? And obviously it hasn't worked for them this year. They're one of the 5 worst defenses in the league. But there are teams that do it this way at a really high level too.
Yeah, I think Houston's a great example of a team that does it at a very high level. They don't disguise the coverage. They say we're going to win with 4, and they absolutely get after you in a way that is very fun to watch. Obviously, I think people remember that Sunday or Monday night football game with the Bills a couple weeks ago where they absolutely lit those guys on fire. So what I would say is that the idea here, like think about, obviously Tampa Bay did this with that Tampa 2 defense, in like the early 2000s when they won that Super Bowl. The idea is that we are going to play a coverage that we are so good at, that we know exactly what's going on, that the guys know where the weak spots are in the coverage that we can maximize, And so I think that's the philosophy, is just getting the guys to play fast. You're not going to put them in mental conflict. And I think when you look at early in the season, they were running a little bit more stuff, like Shane Bowen, obviously no longer the defensive coordinator, but they would it was almost like week to week, they would kind of game. It was like your designer defense of the week. They're kind of a quarters base, but they would run maybe a little bit more 2 or run a little bit more blitz. And you could see that there would be guys like running wide open down the seam, right? And so mentally, I feel like they're like, hey, let's simplify this thing. Let's get it really straightforward so that we lose some of the explosive plays, the unforced mistakes we're getting from kind of the diversity of the defense that we're playing. So I would look at that. And again, this is not to say that they're overly simple, just to be clear, right? Like they do bring fire zones. They do bring 0 in the low red. Like they do have other pitches. But just when I watched it, I was like, this feels a little bit like I mentioned this before. Like getting ready for Minnesota, I was like, this is going to be a tough out because of all the stuff they do, the novel fronts they present, the coverage disguise they bring. I do not feel that way when I watch this Giants defense.
So I remember bringing this up on the show in the past. So for some people, they may have heard this, but it was a while ago. I think one of my favorite, most revealing Hard Knock scenes ever was when the Giants and Brian Daboll decided to hire Shane Bowen, which was like they were looking for a D coordinator. And the logic, like Daboll went to the GM and the owner was like, I like that this guy ranked 5th against the run last year, 4th against the run the year. It was the most simpleton, ridiculous. Like my mom and my brother came up with it thing I've ever heard to like hire this guy. This was the logic. And I was like, oh my God, the NFL is just like everybody else. Like there's not more data going into this than Brian Daboll liking where he ranked in yards per attempt over 3 seasons. Like it was so dumb. But anyway, yes, he has been fired. Their defense is a mess. I just can't believe, go back to week 1 in our pod when we broke this team down. The plan for the Giants, I thought on paper was like pretty good. I mean, this defensive front had a chance to be really, really excellent. Dexter Lawrence last year, in my opinion, was a top 2, 3 defensive lineman in the NFL, certainly D tackle. Brian Burns, I think, is one of the most underrated players in the NFL, one of the best pass rushers in the sport. You've talked a couple times about being impressed over the last couple of weeks, at least, with Abdul Carter, but he was a top 5 pick who's had a disastrous season statistically, and he's been benched multiple times for missing meetings and not taking things seriously. There's other guys up front too that they like, Kayvon Thibodeau, who's tormented Washington at times. For this defense to have not gotten more pressure and harassed quarterbacks is pretty jarring to me. What do you see when you watch the tape of this D-line? Because if you went back and listened to the audio of us previewing the Giants game in week 1, like we talked about it as a real test and one of the better fronts they're going to face all year, and it just hasn't materialized into that.
Yeah, I think that was the thing that was surprising to me is like again watching the New England game. So it's one game, and then I also watched the Bears game. So I've watched a couple games, but if you feel the defensive line, like that's the thing that's kind of surprising to me is like you feel them. Like again, like Abdul Carter is kicking the left tackle's butt for New England, right? Brian Burns is getting quick pressure. I don't think they rush well as a group. So what I mean by that is like you get these two vaunted speed rushers off the edge, Abdul Carter, Brian Burns. Thibodeau, you don't really feel him as much, but then the pocket compression isn't there because what you're getting is you're getting a quick double team on Dexter Lawrence. Usually they're setting the slide to him, and then the three technique can't win. So there's been a couple novel looks like where they've kind of been walking Abdul Carter around. He'll rush on a guard, get a quick win on a guard. Like he is the real deal as a pass rusher. Like don't get it twisted. Like all that off field stuff is really concerning to me that you're the second pick overall and you are missing meetings and you're late and all this stuff's going on. But in terms of on field work, like dude can rush the passer. So can Brian Burns. So like, don't get it twisted. And I think one of the reasons you don't feel their production, like when you look at their pressure rates, you're like, these guys both should be double-digit sack guys, right? Abdul Carter specifically should be a double-digit sack guy, especially if you're looking at the last three games. But a little bit of it's serendipity. And I look back to the New England game is a great example. Like there are some times where he has quick wins. And Drake May just knows exactly where the football needs to and should go, and the ball's out. And it's like, even though that's a fantastic rush, great job by Drake May evading the rush and keeping his eyes down the field and getting the ball out. And I do think a lot of that stems from the fact that they are playing simpler coverage structures. It's something we've talked about here when Ron was here and Chase Young and Montez Sweat and Payne and Allen. It's like, why can't those guys impact the football game? And one of the reasons I would turn to is like, if you know the coverage and you know where the ball should go, there's not a lot of decision-making involved. The ball can just come out. And I think you feel some of that when I feel it when I'm watching these games. So that's something that I would kind of look to and say like, damn, like if they could get a little bit more diverse in the secondary, disguise a little bit more, I think that rush could be outstanding for them.
1.5 sacks for Abdul Carter this year and 1 tackle for loss all season. Pretty crazy.
It's crazy. It's crazy because he doesn't, like when you watch him, you're like, man, this guy's got some juice. So it's confusing to me in terms of lack of production. But like when you look at some of the percentage numbers, like some of those advanced metrics, like you're like
pressure percentage, win rate. Yeah, it's definitely more favorable. And I think those can be more telling because sacks are not a luck stat, but like there was a couple years ago where John Allen had an incredible like fringe all pro season and he had like 3.5 sacks. Then the following year he had like 8 sacks and I didn't think he played nearly as well, but he was cleaning some things up. That's not always the best metric to your point. But I'm just surprised like TFLs, quarterback hits, some of that stuff
100%
isn't even higher. What about the secondary? You mentioned Paulsen and Debo. I want to double click. He's had some really good tape in New Orleans and has come over and helped the Giants out. They've now completely benched as a starter, at least, Deonte Banks, their first-round pick out of Maryland, who, just like Emmanuel Forbes here, fell out of favor and really struggled, was a high draft pick in round 1. But Drew Phillips in the nickel, Javon Holland, the former Dolphin, has had some star performances at safety over the years. Like, what do you see when you watch them?
I think, like you're saying, like I think you see good athletes. I think you see good football players. But again, I don't think you see the production. Like, quite honestly, you don't see guys breaking passes up. You don't see guys turning the football over. And a little bit of it is, I go back to this thing where this notion that it's like, hey, I know the coverage. I don't need to put the ball in harm's way here, quite honestly. And so they don't play as much man as I was expecting. I think when they brought in, when Cordell Flock got the start, when they brought in Paulsen and Debo, those feel like man players to me. And so I honestly felt like coming into the season, they were kind of getting into this man coverage, like we're going to win. We're going to play man. We're going to bring 5. We're going to heat you up and put a lot of pressure on you because our front's going to be so good. And they've kind of shifted to a different approach, quite frankly, right? We're going to play more quarters. We're going to play cover 3. We're going to, play a lot of 2. And again, like in those soft zones, if you're not matching, that's maybe the other thing too. If you're not matching concepts. So like, one of the things that like Kai mentioned on his podcast, Ben Standing mentioned on his podcast that you see from the Minnesota game is they're light in terms of coverage numbers, but they match concepts really well. So like technically you are in cover 2, right? but I'm going to get hands-on. I'm going to carry this. I'm going to make sure I pass it off to the next person in the zone, make sure the windows are really small, really condensed. And this, when you watch the Giants, it's much more like, imagine you're playing Madden and you see your quarters, and like, this is the zone I'm getting to. Like, that's what they're doing. And so some of the more modern principles of good coverage defense, like, you don't see here with the Giants as much. And I think it's negatively affecting those guys' production.
Well, it sounds to me like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll ask, but it sounds like you feel really good about Washington's offense, maybe being able to move the ball and have some success and get right here. That's all the more reason if they could play Jaden Daniels, man, would it be good to get him out there if this is a little bit easier day to see it and read it and get the ball out and move the football. I mean, that would be a big deal for him.
Dude, I think that's exactly how I feel. You're not putting anything in my mouth. Like this is exactly how I feel. I think like this is the game I want to see him play. And again, if the injury says he can't do it, that's totally fine. But like, I think this is one where like he will be able to do what he does at a high level. And again, this is an NFL defense. These are good football players. They may do the Dallas Cowboy thing and all of a sudden be bringing a ton of pressure and blitzing a lot and playing more man coverage because that's the formula that's worked versus this team throughout the season. But I look at Seattle, I look at Minnesota, I look at some of these starts that he's had, and I'm like, these are top flight headache defenses that are really tough to throw the football against. They're really talented in the front. You're not going to be able to run the football the way you want to. They're going to be able to create a ton of pressure. This team, I think they can create pressure, but it's a specific type of pressure. It's a high pocket type of pressure, one you can step up into, and you should know where to go with the football almost immediately. And when you go back and watch week 1, there was a lot of that. You could see his confidence in terms of getting the football out. And I think you're going to see that this weekend. Like when you watch Drake May, again, Drake May's playing at an MVP caliber level, but like he knows where the ball should go right when the ball gets into his hand. And like one of the things Jaden Daniels was so good at last year was that. So I want to see him get back on the field and like let that thing rip and build that confidence back up. Because I do think, again, while this is an NFL defense and very talented, it's a different pitch than what he's seen in some of these starts. Like I went back and watched the Seattle game last night and went back and watched the Minnesota game. Like those defenses are problems, man. I went back and watched the Seattle game versus Minnesota, and I was like, Sam Darnold looked like an MVP caliber player earlier this season, and he looked lost. Like that's what those defenses do. So like this to me feels like let's get on base, let's get the guy some confidence and let him play Jaden Daniels caliber football.
Yeah, would love that. I would add one thing too. The way that they stop the run or don't, as it were, I would just lean heavy into that too, where Jaden will be able to get his over the course of a game. If you stay ahead of the chains and you stay on the field and you run 55, 65 plays, everybody's going to get theirs. But like this is a game to me where I feel like you would be able to have some success with Chris Rodriguez getting downhill.
I think that's 100% right. I think the other reason you don't feel the pass rush as much is they are very rarely playing with the lead. Like we talked about game flow a ton, like they are having to defend the run for 4 quarters, and that is hard. And so you're going to see teams that defenses specifically struggle to stop the run because they're going to see a ton of attempts and they're going to see it late in the game. And again, like I think this personnel, like I think Dexter Lawrence is a good pass rusher. I just talked about Abdul Carter, Brian Burns. I think Roy Robertson as a 4-eye can rush the passer a little bit. You know what he's not great at is sitting double teams and stopping the run. Nunez Roches is again more of a run stopper, but he's struggled a little bit this year. I mean, this is year like 15 for him, so like he's a good player, but obviously near the tail end of what's going on here. Darius Alexander, a pass rushing 4-eye. Not a great run stopper. So like they've got this personnel that I think is built to play and rush the passer with a lead in 2-minute situations, end of game situations, and they just haven't had a lot of bites at the apple. Like we're talking about a 22% pass rush win rate for Abdul Carter in a game that they were down by 20 points going into the third quarter. Like the fact that he's able to do that shows there's talent here. But like if they can't get to it and they're seeing all these runs, like I think that's another element here too. Like if you can get out to a quick lead, like negate what their superpower is in the pass rush, like you can mitigate the effectiveness of that defensive front just by scoring, just by getting to a lead in the game. And then a heavy dose of Chris Rodriguez, heavy dose of Bill Krosky-Merritt. So like to me, in the same way that Minnesota did this to the Commanders last week, I think that's totally on the table this week in terms of your ability to run the football. Absolutely.
I think Washington's O-line will maul them in the running game. And I think this could be, a 100-yard game for Chris Rodriguez. I feel that good if they want to commit to him rather than going back and forth. But the two of them to combine should be able to both really get going. Maybe you got somebody with 80 and somebody with 50 or something like that, and they combine for over 125. All right, let's look at the Commanders' defense and dealing with a rookie quarterback and Jackson Dart next on Take Command. Back on Take Command, Logan Paulsen, Grant Paulsen. It is time for our pick segment brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. The Commanders are 2.5-point road underdogs, catching points against the Giants, a 2-11 team. Feels enticing. You can get them on the money line at plus 116. The total in this game, though, is actually higher than I would have thought, 46.5. So I know it's not fun to bet unders, but I'm going to tell you what, Logan. Last week I hit an under with Washington and Minnesota, and the Commanders really helped me by not scoring any points. 46.5 this week. I'm going under again. I haven't really seen if it's going to be windy, but it's going to be a cold day in the Meadowlands. I could absolutely see Jackson Dart, turning it over a couple of times. Washington's due 8 of their 13 games. They haven't had a turnover. Under 46.5, it's a big total for me. I'm looking at like a 24-17, 24-20 kind of game here. So I'm going to go under 46.5 points.
Yeah, I might go over in this game. I just feel like, a little bit, because I think the Commanders' offense will find some will be effective in this game, and we're going to talk about the Giants' offense here in a second. Jackson Dart, man, that's a funny group to talk about. They do find explosive plays despite limited playmakers, and again, Washington's defense has struggled a little bit. I mean, if they do get a turnover, I would take the under, but I just think there's going to be a lot of points in this game for whatever reason. I
think they're going to grind it out on the ground. I think it's going to be some longer sustained drives. And, they'll be effective, but maybe it's not as explosive. But, we'll see. 46.5 is the total. We're on different sides of this thing, so we didn't help anybody. That is your pick segment brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. All right, let's get into the Giants offense and Jackson Dart. So I want to get your eval of his rookie season. I really am intrigued by this kid. To me, this is what it looks like. He's got a lot of growing up and developing to do on the field. I get that. But you want to talk about an athlete who can run around and make plays and extend and create and make all the throws. This is, to me, as a rookie, this is kind of how it looks.
Oh my gosh, man. So I did, my draft report. I didn't do it that detailed this year because the Commanders weren't interested in a quarterback, obviously. But I did not see this level of athleticism from Jackson Dart coming out. And again, even at Ole Miss, you're like, man, is his arm that good? It's obviously an NFL arm, but is it like a top shelf arm? Because some people are like, oh, he's the next Josh Allen. He's got and I was like, I don't know if I see that caliber of zip to the throw. Then he comes in the league, man, and you feel that. You feel his moxie, his just kind of gunslinger mentality. It's crazy. It's really fun watching cut-ups of him because you're like, don't throw that ball. And he just laser beams that thing in there at 1,000 miles an hour. And it's like, damn, that is a hell of a throw. And so does he have some growing to do? Yeah, but in terms of flashes and sparks and leadership and toughness, I'm kind of in on the Jackson Dart experience now. Can he stay healthy and can he grow and can he mature? Those are all questions that still need to be answered for me. But I really enjoyed watching some of the stuff that he did this year up to this point.
Yeah, I view the rookie year for most quarterbacks. There's a very rare cases with Jaden where you play at an MVP level or CJ Stroud or something. But for the most part, especially when you're drafted down the board a little bit like he was outside of the top 20, I'm looking at it right when you get home from the store and you have all the bags on the counter. Eventually you got to put them away in the pantry, in the fridge, and they'll turn into a meal. But it's do you have the stuff you need? Right. And the rookie year for me, all the bags are on the counter with Jackson Dart. I'm like, holy shnikes. This is going to be a dude who's the starting quarterback of the Giants for 12 years. That's what it feels like to me. And on a binary, if you have to guess at the end of the year, that's where I would sit. I would sit on the side of they have a franchise quarterback. Now, I think with him, it's raw. And I see a lot of stuff that needs refinement. It's not rookie year Jaden Daniels. It's not CJ Stroud or Dak or one of these guys. But I just think he's a bit of a wild card, but the tools are loud, man. It's like watching a baseball player who He's got pop. He's got speed. He can field a little bit. Now he's got to put it all together because he didn't have a great year statistically in his first big league season. But I've seen all the tools, and I like how you worded it. I am in on the Jackson Dart experience, I think, from an evaluational standpoint.
Like I was watching the Philly game, and he was running around. He was running around like a lunatic, and you're like, "What is this?" Like he pushes out of a sack, and you're like throwing back across his body, and it is a laser beam right in the basket. Like and I think the other thing too, dude, is when you look at the playmakers that they've got. Like so, just as an example, like this is a good way to preview the playmakers while talking about Jackson Dart. Like their number one touchdown getter right now is Theo Johnson, the tight end. And I like Theo Johnson coming out of Penn State. He's 6'6". He's a freak athletically, like one of the best RAS scores at the position the last couple of years. He's got a little bit of like Rob Gronkowski. Like I'm just a huge man who's fast to his game. And like they're lining him up in like third down and red zone situations and being like, go in on a post, go in on a fade. And like that was not on my bingo card when I started watching the film. Like I think he's a good player, but to be featuring him in the offense in that way is crazy because like he doesn't catch the ball that great. Like he kind of has like stone hands, but like that's the guy that you're looking to win in man-to-man coverage situations. Like good for Jackson Dart, man. You're finding those opportunities. Like they had him on who were they playing? They were playing New England. They had him on a choice takeoff. He's 6'6", 270 pounds. Like that's not the guy that you'd think, but they're making the offense work because Jackson Dart is laying the ball in there and he's using his big frame to make a ton of, like he has a catch versus New Orleans where Jackson Dart rips a post and it was like watching a basketball player go up for a rebound. Or there's a seam versus Chicago where he's working the seam, Tampa 2 over the top of the middle linebacker, perfect ball placement. And so like you're looking at these throws, you're like, dang, like Jackson Dart is dealing. And there is an element of that to his game. Like he has these splash flash moments. And I think when you look at Theo Johnson's receptions since Jackson Dart's been in the game, you're like, oh, this is why. And then there's also like some cartoon stuff. Like you watch the Denver game, he throws the ball into double coverage. Jalen Hyatt gets annihilated. The ball pops up to Theo Johnson who catches it. And then stiff arms two dudes and runs for a touchdown. Like there is some like, don't do that, Jackson Dart. Like, why are you doing that type stuff? But I think it's also like he's doing it with a bunch of playmakers that are not like what you think of as NFL playmakers, I guess.
This is how I felt about Daniel Jones forever. And they finally got Malik Neighbors, who's great, but is out and has been almost all year with his injury. And I think you grade on a curve a little bit, right? You've got to. With Daniel Jones, everyone's like, look at what's happening. And oh my God. And it's like, yeah, it's funny how when you have a couple of weapons and some players that can make you look better, you get better at the most dependent position probably in all of sports. It's funny you bring up Theo Johnson, by the way. I was saying this to someone yesterday. So on NFL Pro, there's a lot of ways that people watch tape and as, you know, outsiders who just like are novices like me that are just going back and watching games and looking at all 22 or whatever. NFL Pro's been really cool because now you can essentially do cut-ups, which is a little bit more like how like you would watch tape as a player or whatever. And what I mean by that is I can like sort things out. So I can just look at all of like Theo's targets and all of his catches or whatever. But the reason I bring this up is I was joking with someone that every single catch he makes looks the exact same. It's always like a defender in his chest with him like looking back at the line of scrimmage, jumping up to try to like moss a dude or get a rebound, like you said. Like it's like these downfield throws, degree of difficulty 100, no separation, like, and that's their offense kind of right now. It's so like difficult. And by the way, I was reading that Dart and him are like best friends, and that's the guy he works with on the side the most. And so it's not surprising to me that he's like taking all these chances 50-50 because I think they're tight and they see it the same way. But it is like pushing a boulder up a hill a little bit. Like there's not that many easy downfield throws in this offense that you're going to find. Yeah.
So what I'd say is like I think this gives me a lot of confidence that Theo Johnson can have a larger role next year, right? Because again, like he's winning some of these matchups. Like there's a throw versus Chicago, where it's like man coverage. He's running a corner route. He big bodies at the top. There's a little bit of suddenness. There's a one where he beats Patrick Surtain on a dig. Like that was not on my bingo card. So larger role, but like you need a complementary piece to that. So like when Malik Neighbors comes back, maybe they draft somebody, all of a sudden you're like, okay, this thing's a little bit more dynamic, got a little more juice to it. But it's him and like Wan'Dale Robinson basically. And like, so I would say Theo Johnson's kind of like their explosive downfield target, which it's hard for me to even say that because it doesn't fit with the body type, right? But Wan'Dale Robinson's the guy that moves the change. I think he's got over 70 catches this year. He's got about 700, 800 yards receiving, and he's like the slot, twitchy guy, right?
Routes, crossers, slants. He's catching the ball around the line.
Yeah, and again, he does a really good job with that. And I think, to your point, it just speaks to what Jackson Dart has done, what Jameis Winston has done when they come in there. And there is a little bit, like you watch that Detroit game, and again, Jackson didn't start that game. That's a Jameis Winston game. But they are trick play city, man. It's like, hey, we're running throwbacks to the quarterback, or we're running a double pass flea flicker. And they're like, so that's the thing that's kind of sparked the offense, in my opinion, since Kafka's become the head coach, is they're just like, we know that we're not as good offensively, and we're just going to throw everything in our playbook at you to try and win this football game. So looking at the offense, like there is a talent at the quarterback, and I think he's good. And the other thing you got to negotiate is the quarterback run stuff. Like he has a run versus the Bears. It's a 3rd and 4. No, it's like a 3rd and 10. They run quarterback GT in a 3rd and 10, and he breaks it off for 35 yards. He gets called back because there's a block on the back, but that's what you're talking about here. It's just like the variance that he brings, Jackson Dart, is incredibly high. And now the play caller is like saying, hey, screw it. We're going to bring more variance because we know we need every ounce of this thing to win. So that's where I'd say, like, defensively for the Commanders, you got to kind of manage some of that. Keep him in the pocket. What are our rules for in 3rd long situation versus the quarterback run? They don't really want him managing those situations. Like they're trying to make it easy for him. That's why they run him so much in those looks. Because again, like, he is good, but there's also a ton of like, don't throw that football in there. So I think they're leaning into that as much as they can from a quarterback standpoint, and they're also leaning into it from a play calling standpoint, which is one of the reasons I'm like, I think there's going to be a lot of points scored in this game because you're going to see some stuff because I think both teams are going to be striving to get a win.
I would add too, defensively, that there's really no reason you can't get a takeaway or two in this game. This has been a huge problem all year. Really for the majority of the last couple of years at times. But 8 of 13 games, they don't have one. They're now second to last in the NFL in turnover margin. But Dart, as a young player, is going to give you chances. You talked about the decisions throwing the ball. He also will put it on the ground. That's something. I'm sure they preach this all week. It's not new. But every single minute of every single meeting, I'm showing clips of how many times he's fumbled and, trying to punch the ball out and do these little things to just turn them over. I mean, bad teams will beat themselves. You just have to let them, right? And they're 2-11 for a reason. And so that's something that I would be preaching as well. The one other thing defensively I'll say, Darius Slayton gets targeted once or twice a game on like trying to get an explosive. And it shouldn't be that complicated to like not allow that to happen when you look at his numbers. It's not like he's had a big year. They paid him a bunch of money. He had one really, really good play a week or two ago. I don't remember which game I was watching. But like they're going to take a shot at some point. And to me, it's about like making them go on drives. Like, don't give him the easy 59-yard touchdown because he gets behind you when they finally take their shot. Like when they take those, you got to D them up. And because that's the whole thing is right that they're going for broke a little bit. So I think if you can kind of keep them from hitting a home run and make them have to go base to base here, they will beat themselves. That's what 2-11 teams do. That would be my entire philosophy in this game.
I think that's a great point because again, like when you watch it, they're fast. Like Darius Slayton is fast, right? Wan'Dale Robinson is fast. Theo Johnson for a tight end is fast, and they do get explosive chunks. And when they do, they tend to score, right? So if you can limit that, and the other thing too is they've had a really hard time running the football, just not very efficient. A little bit of that's the offensive line health. I think there are certain guys playing well, like Andrew Thomas looks like he's back and looks like the dude, and all those things are awesome. But on the whole, I think their offensive line is struggling, and they don't create a ton of space for the back. And so if you can keep them in 2nd and longs, and then keep everything in front of you in 3rd and 10, like Jackson Dart will give you a shot. So to me, you just want to increase the number of shots you're getting at the football in those 3rd long situations because I agree with you. I think he'll give you one. It's just about, can you play a clean brand of football and be good in third down situation? You're going to be in a lot of 3rd longs. Can you be good? Obviously, last week against Minnesota, you weren't. So that's kind of my thought here is like make them go on long drives, make Jackson Dart beat you from the pocket. If you can do that, I think you're just tipping the deck in your favor in a way that's going to be really nice and hopefully get you the dub.
Thomas, by the way, at tackle has one of the top 10 rates pressures against in the league. He's been very, very good, to your point. So he's the guy to know on that offensive line, but otherwise, they could probably be had. All right, Logan, last thing before we get out of here. Who eats? Give me a player. You can pick one on either side of the ball, but somebody based on this matchup that you really, really like playing at a high level.
I'm going to give you two on offense. One, Jaden Daniels, if he plays, I'm really excited to see him in this game. Like, I'm a Jaden Daniels fan. I think this is a perfect game for him. Hopefully he plays. If not, and Chris Rodriguez, man, like, let's lean on this defensive line. Let's run the football. Let's be consistent. Let's stick with it. I think he'll have a huge day, which I'm really looking forward to. And then defensively, man, I look at Kinlaw, I look at Payne, and I'm like, you guys get after this interior. Just be yourselves, be physical. Let's get a little bit of line movement. Let's put those guys in a blender. You're one of the biggest, freakiest dudes in the NFL. Be that guy this weekend. And Deron Payne, you've been one of the more consistent players on defense. Like, let's go get that thing. So I look at both those guys and say, like, lead us to a victory. Be dominant. I think you can physically against this group. Let's go get it done.
Great chance for the Commanders to end an 8-game skid in the division on the road at the Meadowlands against the New York Giants. For our producer, Evan, and for Logan, I'm Grant saying so long. Next time you hear from us will be Sunday afternoon, right after the game. So make sure you come back to the feed. As soon as the game ends, we will be giving you a post-game recap of everything that went down. Thanks for checking us out on Take Command.